That's it. You've had it. You are tired of being a landlord in the state of California, and it is time to sell your single family home or your condo. Unfortunately, not enough landlords, real estate agents, or property managers know the proper way to sell a tenant-occupied property. And California doesn't make it easy. And if you don't do the process right, you're going to end up costing yourself time, money, and end up with legal and physical headaches. We are going to run through and explain what you need to know to make sure that you minimize inconvenience for you as a landlord and the renter as well. Hey there, Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates. We specialize in selling tenant-occupied properties. And remember, we can't give tax or legal advice, but for the most honest and up-to-date real estate advice, subscribe to this channel. Let's run through the options that a single family or condo owner has when it comes to a renter occupied property to sell. And this may seem obvious, but there's some nuance. So make sure you stick around. The way to net the most money as a property owner would be to actually terminate the tenancy and sell the property without a renter in it. And the advantages to this are that you're going to be able to control the condition. You're going to be able to do any fixing or cleaning. You're going to make it easier to show so that we can get agents in there, potential buyers to see it. This will then open it up to the largest pool of buyers. And that includes people who are going to be first-time buyers and move into it. It includes move-up buyers. It includes investors who want to rent the thing out. So the largest pool of buyers will be here. And that's going to lead to more money in the end. But it's going to take time and effort to get the property empty. That's what you need to understand as a landlord and run those numbers. So to terminate the tenancy, it could be an at-fault reason, like maybe the renter has stopped paying rent. So you're going to go ahead and hire an eviction attorney. You're going to move through that route to get the renter out. That's one way to get it empty. The other reason would be a no-fault reason. Renter hasn't done anything wrong, but you're going to give the proper notice, which could be a 30, 60, or 90-day notice. In some areas, you're not going to be able to do that. And that's why it's important to understand where the property is and what local renter protections are in place. The other possibility to get the renter out, and it would be to do cash for keys or a tenant buyout. And again, there may be local regulations related to that. So it's important to work with an agent to point you in the right direction to get that property empty correctly. When we list properties, we're there from the very beginning helping with this all the way through the final sale. One reason the landlord may not want to have the property vacant and sitting there waiting for the buyer would be the possibility of a squatter moving in. So I had a listing like this recently where the owner could have terminated the tenancy and sold it empty, but they were deathly afraid of the idea of squatters moving in. So they kept the renter in and we sold it with the renter in place. All right, moving into the next phase, we have the renter staying in place, but the property will close after that renter moves out. So this is going to net the most money of the next methods that we talk about, but there are still some disadvantages to it. It'll be more difficult to show the property. You have to work with the renter's schedule. Property may not show its best. There's no motivation for a renter to make sure it's clean and easy to show and presentable condition, so it may not show its best. And then there are still going to be buyers that are worried that the renter may not move out on time and that the sales process is going to take longer. For example, if they're a first-time home buyer and they're locking in their loan rate, they could potentially lose their mortgage rate lock if it takes too long to close on the property. So you're going to have a smaller pool of buyers. The disadvantage for the seller in this one is that if the renter does not move out when they're supposed to, assuming they've been given proper notice and then it moves to an unlawful detainer, it will take additional time plus money to get that renter out. There is uncertainty there for both the buyer and the landlord. Here's a quick story about a gentleman named Tom, we'll call him. Tom was a landlord selling his property. He hired an agent who he thought knew what he was doing, and unfortunately, that agent tied him up in a deal like this. Tom thought he was going to sell it with the renter in place, but the agent had Tom sign an offer to where Tom had to get the renter out. So it ended up costing Tom a lot of time and money to get that renter out when he wasn't even trying to sell it like that. He was trying to sell it like the next method. The renter's going to stay put, but after the property closes, the renter will move out. So this would shift the burden to the buyer from the seller. So the seller doesn't have to worry as much that the tenant isn't going to move out, but that uncertainty for the buyer means that they're going to pay less for the property than the last route because it shifts some of the risk to the buyer, so that buyer is going to go ahead and offer less money to offset potentially the renter not moving out. It requires that the seller give proper notice and still has some of the disadvantages like we discussed as far as making it not easy to see the property. Also, the property may not be showing its best because the renter has no motivation. So this process of selling it with the renter in place and letting the buyer inherit this is less than ideal. But you'll net more money this way because at least the renter should be moving out. A notice has been given. This will net you more money than the last method. When the last method and the least desirable for the landlord, because they're going to take the biggest haircut, is to sell it with the renter in place, and it's fully the buyer's problem. So the owner can't or won't terminate the tenancy. It's going to be completely up to the buyer to inherit that problem and take over. So this is the least desirable for the landlord in the sense that they will net the least amount of money. But like I referenced before, there's certain landlords who don't want a property empty because they're worried about squatters. Additionally, depending where the property is, the current owner may not be able to terminate the tenancy. For example, if it's in an area like LA County unincorporated, there's very few ways to get a renter to move out for a single family home. There's extreme renter protections in place. So the only easy way is owner move in, and there's still a bunch of hoops to jump through. So in that case, the landlord isn't going to move in. They have to find a buyer who's willing to move in and jump through all the hoops, pay the relocation assistance, give the renter the proper notice, and then deal with the possibility the renter doesn't move out. So there's a lot of uncertainty for the buyer and a lot of work. This may be the only path that you can go as a landlord, depending on where the property is, but you will net the least amount of money. Important to know that going in. So why is it important to have an agent who understands how to sell a tenant-occupied property? Any of these methods, you need somebody on your side who understands the process and knows the direction to go. So if you're going to sell it vacant, you have to make sure you can actually do that, and then what appropriate paperwork needs to be served and how that process works out and what to do if the renter doesn't move out. The other methods where you're selling it with the renter, same thing. Need to know if you can give notice, and if you are going to give notice, you need to make sure it's the proper notice. If you're going the last method where you're selling it with the renter in place, you need an agent who can explain to other agents and potential buyers, hey, this is the process, this is what needs to happen. That will help you maximize the amount of money you net. You can't leave it as a complete unknown, and who has people like good eviction attorneys, they can refer to those people as well. That's going to help make sure you squeeze out more money and net more as the seller. Plus, that person's going to also know how to deal with your renter and make sure that they're following all the laws and rights of that renter and making life easier for you and the renter. More important points. In order to terminate a tenancy, it needs to be a periodic tenancy, most often month to month. If it's a fixed term tenancy, for example, still on a year-long lease, you're not going to be able to go ahead and cut that short as a landlord to sell the property. You can offer cash for keys or offer to buy out the rest of the lease, or sell it with that renter in place, and the new landlord will have to honor the rest of the lease term. If the property is month to month and you're interested in terminating the tenancy, it's going to matter where the property is. Now, in the state of California, at the statewide level, we have the Tenant Protection Act, or AB 1482. I've released a ton of content on that. Most single-family homes and condos are exempt from the Tenant Protection Act as long as the exemption language has been given. If you haven't given the exemption language, that's another step and another important thing you'll need to have an agent who knows what to do. For those properties that are exempt from the Tenant Protection Act, there isn't any relocation assistance that's owed to the renter as of right now, nor do you actually have to give a reason for terminating the tenancy. You just need to give the proper notice length. It needs to be served with the correct language and served in the correct way. And it could be a 30, 60, or 90-day notice to terminate tenancy. Where the property is matters, because even though most houses and condos are exempt from the statewide renter protections, some areas have local renter protections. For example, LA County, it's almost impossible to get renters out if you're going to sell that property. And LA City, there's special hoops you're going to have to jump through. You're going to have to give the appropriate notice. You're going to have to notify LAHD in LA City. You're going to have to give the proper reason to terminate tenancy, you're going to owe relocation assistance. There are many areas that have more strict regulations than the statewide Tenant Protection Act, and it could vary from one block to the next. For example, I had a listing in Compton. There were no special protections for that single family home. It fell under the Tenant Protection Act. I talked to another landlord who had a property in Compton. Turns out it was LA County unincorporated, just one block into it, and it completely changed what needed to happen for that property. That's why it's important to work with an expert who knows the local area and the local regulations to point you in the right direction. We hope you found this video helpful and established why you need an expert in your corner if you're going to sell a tenant-occupied property. Make sure you reach out if you have any questions. You can also leave your questions below. Sign up for our free weekly email newsletter so you don't miss a single update, because things are rapidly changing all throughout California right now for landlords. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we can't wait to help you.